around in El Salvador because of the dangerous situations that they've been put in when they go back to their original place of origin. So I think that the points that are made really don't apply in the situation, and just don't refute the points that I've made.
But over the years, at any given time, there's probably 50 countries in the world in some type of turmoil. Why have we said El Salvador? Why have we said that, why has the sanctuary movement said, well, let's pick El Salvador and bring as many of those people to the United States as possible? Why not from all over the country, all over the world? Because, let's face it, there are a great number of people out there who want to come to this country. And the United States has a very gracious immigration policy. Over 600,000 people a year come to the United States in a legal manner. They wait in line, they get their visas, they go through the screening process. Why should we violate national security, as the sanctuary movement would propose, and bring these people into the United States surreptitiously, under the cover of darkness, at night, concealed in vehicles or otherwise, smuggle them across the border and subject them to the banditry along the border and everything else that's going on?
Now, Bob is saying that the churches, the sanctuary movement, in fact, brings in people from El Salvador and Guatemala, and that this is the issue, the illegal work of the churches. How do you respond to that, Teresa?
Well, I feel that the people from the churches, we have come to realize and to understand that as they come, they do have a right to come through the borders.
But is your congregation going into Mexico and bringing El Salvadorians into the United States?
Not my congregation. No, they are here.
You're serving people who are already here.
Are already here.
And so you've opened up your doors to them, and you become a means of trying to serve them as people who are in need of help in Los Angeles.
Yes, that's as far as.
Do you find then that many of them are unable to apply for legal asylum and the rest?
Well, we know that we help them through the process. They can apply. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we know how these families who have been terrorized and who have been put in jail and tortured, and once they come and knock at the door in the middle of the night and say, we're coming for you, or just wait and see, we'll be back tomorrow, they have to leave. So that makes them people who cannot prepare things. They cannot bring any documentation, any way how to prove. And according to immigration here, in order for them to apply and bring this application for a political asylum, they have to have, it's a list of different rules, how they have to prove that they were political refugees. And so we find that they're here and there's no way as far as papers or documents that are being asked. And so they still apply, but we do know, and I'm sure Paul will know exactly, the many thousands of applications that are pending at the immigration office for these people to receive political asylum, and that we only had 2 persons in Los Angeles from the thousands of applications who have received political asylum.
I think there's an important point here, and that is that the notion that the sanctuary movement has to go reach out to bring people in is a false notion. People are coming. They're coming into this country. It wouldn't matter what the sanctuary movement, that they're here. If you go down to Nogales, Arizona, where the border was involved in the sanctuary case, there are holes in the border at every point. People can walk through the border easily, without apprehension, without anything. Many people did. Many people still do, as we speak. There's a flow of people leaving their country because of the conditions in that country, and they won't be stopped by anybody.
What are these conditions in these countries? Bob has raised the point that they come primarily for economic reasons.
Well, I think that the evidence about that is overwhelmingly against that position. There was no massive migration prior to the political violence and starting in 1979, 1980. There was some immigration before, but there's been a mass immigration since then. You don't have similar migration patterns from Costa Rica or Honduras or countries that are not involved in the same political upheaval and human rights violations involved in El Salvador and Guatemala. I mean, the documentation about human rights violations in those countries is overwhelming. It is admitted largely by the government, although there's some dispute about it. But you could go to groups like Amnesty International, other internationally respected fact finders, the international organizations. It is widely understood that there is political murder, there is torture, there is all of these kinds of serious human rights abuse going on in El Salvador and Guatemala, and that is the primary reason for the flow of refugees. And I think that the sanctuary movement was responding to the treatment of people who are fleeing those conditions. It is not necessarily responding to efforts to deal with immigration problems other than that. It is really focused on the problems of these people in distress who qualify for special treatment under our law and international law, and it is not necessarily dealing with other legitimate problems that the Immigration Service may have, dealing with other kinds of people. And I think it's important to draw that distinction.
Well, let me just say that, the sanctuary proponents have continuously talked of the violence going on in El Salvador, the repression, etc. I have yet to see any documented proof from any study that's been conducted that would indicate that there is widespread problems against the populace of El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
It's they continually speak of the people being put to death and so forth by the different political groups in El Salvador, but there's an absence of documentation to prove this point. Yet it's a constant thing that's being claimed, but the documented proof is non-existent.
The proof for us people in churches is that we are going almost every month. There's a group of us from this area going to visit El Salvador. I was there a year ago, and what is presently happening that is very destructive to the civilian population are the bombings, who are happening in areas where mainly the target are women and children. And they have been displaced in El Salvador, into the capital, San Salvador, and put in camps. Others are just having to keep moving and keep coming into Guatemala and then into Mexico. But the bombings are presently, and this is what I would like to raise, and what the sanctuary movement has been saying all along, is to be able to say very clear that it's our administration who is supporting the war, the killing, because we are sending millions of dollars in arms, as well as in ways to train these security officers who at presently are coming back to become again the death squads that in 1980 was very much active and alive. It's again now in 86 coming up again, and it's happening. Where
right.
People are every day just being found again, tortured with arms in the back tied, and leaders in the human rights movements in El Salvador. Right now, there's several of them, a good dozen of them, detained, but we don't know exactly where are they. They have disappeared. Now, I'm very gladly to send you some of these material documents. I do have.
Teresa, I don't know the people that you're interviewing who claim to be repressed back in El Salvador. It's amazing to me because we apprehend on the southern border of California, just California alone, almost 2,000 people every single night. These are illegal aliens who are infiltrating the United States. A good percentage of those people are coming from El Salvador. We have made it a point over the past 6 months or 8 months to interview these people, to ask them, why are you coming to the United States? What is your purpose? Are you fleeing some type of persecution in your country? Their answer inevitably is no, we're coming to LA because we want a job. We need to work. We're seeking a better life. So these people, if I were an El Salvadorian and I were approached by the sanctuary movement here and asked the question, were you coming because of persecution? Of course I'm going to say yes. But when we apprehend those people at the border, they do not claim persecution in their country. They say they're coming for economic reasons.
But historically, Bob, historically, it's not immigration to the United States for economic reasons. One of the historic reasons, we just celebrated the Statue of Liberty, give me your poor. The German wave, the Italian wave of immigration, the Irish wave of immigration, has that not been one of the concrete forms of immigration across the
But we're seeing a different type of illegal immigration, and I quote, illegal immigration to the United States now. We're seeing a different type of element coming into the United States. We have heard the concerns of local police chiefs in places like San Diego, where they're claiming that 26% of their felony arrests are illegal aliens, people who are not even supposed to be in this country. In a place like Santa Ana, California, I've been told by a narcotics sergeant who's been working narcotics for 6 years in that particular city that 99% of the arrests in that city for narcotics violations are illegal aliens. Right here in Los Angeles, not too long ago, the Rampart Division of the LAPD held a drug task force operation in the Rampart Division, and they arrested some 2,000 odd people. 65% of those people were illegal aliens. Now, all nationalities were represented within that group, including a large number of El Salvadorians. So I'm saying the people are, all of those illegal immigrants that are crossing the lines surreptitiously are not all coming for economic reasons. There are those that are coming to prey on the people in this society. Those are the kind of people we should screen out and keep out of this country. That's not no different from any other country in the world. Every country has a screening process to determine who should come to that country. If we are to concede and open up the borders and just let anybody in this country, our society will be in such a turmoil that we will very quickly turn into a third world country ourselves.
I think it's very important to distinguish between refugees and an illegal immigration problem. No one is questioning the right and the duty of law enforcement authorities to apprehend people engaged in criminal activity, whether they're here without documents or with documents or whatever. No one is saying that. There is no significant evidence that refugees are involved in any large degree of criminal activity. There just isn't that evidence. None of the statistics that are being put forward by the Immigration Service, even if one assumes that they are accurate generally, deal with refugees. And I think that the statement that you heard before from Bob, that there's no evidence about what has gone on in El Salvador and Guatemala over the last 5 or 6 years, is absolutely incredible. There is a mountain of evidence. The U.S. government accepts most of that evidence. State Department reports recount that evidence. There is no one that disputes that up to 50 or 60,000 people have been killed in political murders in El Salvador since 1979. There isn't any serious dispute about that. Even our own government doesn't dispute that. And yet, that kind of evidence doesn't seem to trickle down to the immigration authorities that are ruling on asylum applications, which means that the system is unfair, and that's why people don't use it. They don't put people, no lawyer in his right mind in this city would tell a Salvadoran person to apply for a political asylum, because it's like saying you're going to get a ticket back to El Salvador, because the system is unfair. And before you get the ticket back to El Salvador, you're going to spend a year or two in El Centro in 115-degree heat in the summertime, and you may be separated from your family during that time. And at some point, you're going to give up, even if you had a good claim for asylum, and you're going to go back and risk El Salvador because of that. That's what the sanctuary movement is responding to. It's not responding to the whole immigration problem. It's not dealing with the whole immigration problem. It's dealing with a set of people who should be treated more fairly by the government and aren't. And if the government treated them fairly, I don't think you would see a sanctuary movement. You would see people use the legal process in this country if it worked for people in that situation. And another important point is that if you took all the asylum applications around the country, you find an average rate of somewhere around 20 25 to 30% of asylum applications granted. Because if you come from Cuba, or if you're a hockey star from Czechoslovakia, is the latest one, you're going to get asylum. But if you're a Salvadoran, you've got a 3 in 100 chance of getting asylum. And if you're a Guatemalan, you have less than a 1 in 100 chance of getting asylum. Notwithstanding the fact that the human rights situation in those countries is at least as bad as any human rights situation in the entire world.
Yes, Teresa.
I want to say that it is a myth to say that the Central Americans are here for the economic reasons, to find these great jobs or to take jobs from U.S. citizens. And I'm afraid what Mr. Isel has been recently having to deal with this of narco traffics and the drugs problem. When the city of Los Angeles declared sanctuary, that was one of the things that we were asking the police not to work with the immigration department. And I'm afraid with this thing coming with the problem of drugs and wanting to reach these criminals, as they're saying, what they're hoping is that the police will be referring and working with immigration. But that's something that we're hoping it will not happen.
Well, what you're proposing, Teresa, is a ripoff for the American taxpayer. You are saying, when you say proposed sanctuary, the city of Los Angeles...
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we must wrap up. I'm sure that you can see from the panelists today that the issues relationship to immigration and the sanctuary movement are very complex and very deeply felt. If you would like more information on this subject, we encourage you to contact Ecumedia, which is located at 4270 West 6th Street, Los Angeles, California, 90020. The people of the churches who see themselves opening up their arms to the stranger in our midst and finding ways by which they can serve and match their needs are responding to a historic biblical mandate to treat the stranger as you treat your own sisters and brothers. We trust that every viewer will continue to give their most serious ethical concern for this matter in our society. Thank you, the viewers, for being with us today. Thank you, panelists, for being a part of this discussion, and we'll see you next week.